Okay, a transcript of what Pope Francis said yesterday about prohibiting gays from entering seminary has just been leaked. I know this is the third video I've done on this today. Today. And the reason why is this story is developing very rapidly. We initially saw reports of Pope Francis using a second time a very offensive term for gay people that starts with an F and rhymes with Bob Saget's last name. Pope Francis has used that term again as of yesterday. And then he has quadrupled down for the fourth time now, saying that people with deep seated homosexual tendencies should not be admitted in the seminary. I covered that in the first episode. But then right after that, Father James Martin came out and said, hey, Pope Francis just told me this about his view about seminarians who are homosexual, and he thinks that there are holy people who are in these circumstances. So I covered that as well in a second show. And now the third show, the transcript of what Pope Francis actually said yesterday to a large group of seminarians was just released. And it was released actually by somebody who doesn't agree with Pope Francis on the issue. And they released this transcript because they're mad that Pope Francis said this. And you can clearly see it in their commentary on the transcript, which I am about to show you right now before I get Epsteined. That's why I'm sneaking it in. Stay tuned. That is what we have in store for today. All right, I am going to share the transcript of what Pope Francis has said. We're not reading the whole thing because there's a number of things that he covers. We're just going to the part that's relevant to today's discussion. From Silere non possum, silence is not possible. Freewheeling Pope Francis, F word, gay culture in the Vatican. From this article, they give a transcript. It's towards the bottom. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. I'm bringing this to your attention because you're likely not going to hear about this elsewhere. And so need to call your attention to what he actually said. Here it is. And finally, to conclude on a high note, the Pope was asked a question about seminaries and vocations. By the way, this is Google Translate. Francis replied, 2 things I want to say. Today, there is the problem of right-wing ideologies. I intervened in 4 dioceses. There are kids who cling to ideas because they have a problem inside. Then he spoke about homosexuality. What I said on this issue, if a boy wants to enter the seminary and has a homosexual tendency, stop him. Stop him, he says. Again, happy Pride Month, everybody. All of y'all out there celebrating Pride Month. Yeah, I hope that this is rain on your parade. Okay, this is something that the dicastery for the clergy said, and I support it, he says. What is he referring to? That 2005 document that I've gone over about 10 times now. This says people with deep-seated homosexual tendencies cannot be admitted in the seminary. That was 2005. It's magisterial. Pope Francis reiterated that. 2016, I showed that to you in a show earlier. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. He reiterated it in 2018. He reiterated it a month ago. He reiterated it right here, which is a transcript from yesterday. So he has quadrupled down on this particular point. And he says, because today the homosexual culture has progressed a lot, and there are good guys who want the Lord, but it's better not, better not. In other words, there's people who are attracted to people of the same sex that, you know, are living holy lives. They're chaste, they're not acting on this stuff, and they love the Lord, but it's still best if they have a deep-seated attraction to people of the same sex, you know, men of the same sex, they cannot be admitted into seminary. I said men of the same sex. You know what I mean. If they're men attracted to other men. Okay. A Monsignor who works in the Vatican once told me, Your Holiness, I want to say one thing. I'm worried about the gay culture in here. And Pope Francis said, I said, yes, there's an air of, and then F word that rhymes with Bob Saget's last name. I don't think YouTube will let me say it, so I can't say it, but you can clearly read what it says. I mean, very, very clearly right there on the screen. There's an air of F word. If it's true, there is in the Vatican. In other words, I'm sorry, he says, it's true, there is in the Vatican. So in the Vatican, there are people who are promoting F word. Okay. Not something that was, a bombshell to us. We kind of already knew that there's people there. There's always Judases. There's always people promoting things that are contrary to church teaching. If that happened with an apostle, it will certainly happen with people surrounding the Pope today. Well, Pope Francis opposes that, and he reiterates this point that he had made in a previous conversation, but he says that word again. Now, it's interesting because he said that word less than a month ago. Massive, massive explosion all over the media. Pope Francis, through the Vatican press, apologized because he didn't want to offend anybody with the term, but he still needed to make his point. And here he is using the term again. My speculation here is that he apologized because somebody told him, hey, Holiness, you used some kind of word, or you said something that was offensive to people from, the homosexual community, and they took it the wrong way. And he said, well, hey, I'm sorry. I'm not meaning to be derogatory or disrespectful to the people's dignity or something like that. But, I apologize for that. And I suspect, wasn't told what that term was that he said. That's the only explanation I have for him saying it again. Because, again, he apologized, but then he uses it again. I'll make of that whatever you will. It's true, there is in the Vatican F word. But listen, Monsignor, today for our culture, it's an honor. In other words, in our culture today, people who are acting on homosexual inclinations, that's celebrated in the world today. I mean, Pride Month, right? It's celebrated. So he says, let's be careful not to despise people with homosexual tendencies, but to accompany them. So let's try to help these people. Let's try to help them understand. Not that the church hates them. No, but that the church loves them and God loves them. We don't love their sin. God doesn't love their sin. We don't welcome their sin, but we welcome them. And so he's being very pastoral. I appreciate his balanced take here. And he says there's many good people here. There are people who really struggle with this, but are good people. And they're trying to live a good life, and they're struggling with sin, just like people who are heterosexual, who are good people who are struggling with other sins. He says accompany them and help them. Send them to psychologists. That's going to be against the woke crowd today. Wow. He says people who are struggling with same-sex attraction, send them to psychologists. I can't believe that hasn't blown up yet. I'm sure it's coming. Wow. Please, however, be careful when receiving them in the seminary. And the reason why he says that is because that 2005 document that he backs up says people with deep-seated homosexual tendencies cannot be admitted, but somebody with some kind of transitory or temporary, situation where they're struggling with those inclinations, but it is not deep-seated and they have effectively rooted it out. And they have done so 3 years prior to the diaconate, they can be admitted in the seminary. So that 2005 document says that. That's likely what he's referring to here. What can I say? This is now the commentary of the person who leaked the transcript. What can I say? The Pope's idea is always the same, and although the press does everything to cast his statements as welcoming, Bergoglio demonstrates that he has a great prejudice towards people. So again, the person who leaked this transcript is not happy with Pope Francis. And again, there's a lot of priests and a lot of people who were there for this conversation, who heard what the Pope said. And so Unless there's a whole bunch of people who come forward saying, hey, no, this never happened, this is completely made up, I think you can know that this is a reliable transcript. Not only homosexuals, but especially if they are priests. This person, again, is not happy with Pope Francis's comments. We have to ask ourselves whether he thinks it is more serious that they are homosexuals or that they are priests. Again, they're not happy with what Pope Francis has said, so they have leaked this transcript. Well, you know what? I thank them for leaking the transcript because it flies in the face of what the media has said about Pope Francis in the past. A lot of the narratives that are out there about Pope Francis, that he's this woke, that he's this liberal pope, it flies in the face of that. So I actually am happy, even though this person had the wrong motives for releasing it. I'm glad that they did release the transcript so that y'all can actually see what Pope Francis is really saying. While Francis continues to condemn the chatter, it seems that in Santa Marta there is coming and going of old hags who continue to go to the Pope to badmouth everyone except to make amends for their own sins. Unfortunately, all we have to do is ask the Lord, your kingdom come. Yeah, okay. That's a L take, but whatever. I don't really care to engage the person who leaked this. That's not the point here. But as I covered in the stream earlier, we saw Pope Francis just met in a private audience earlier today with Father James Martin. And here you can see him blessing him for his 25th anniversary of his ordination. And Martin says, I just met with Pope Francis with his permission to share this. And of course, we don't actually have a full transcript of what Pope Francis allegedly said, but here's his retelling of it. The Holy Father said he has known many good and holy and celibate seminarians and priests with homosexual tendencies. And I want to say about that, okay, yeah, there are people who are priests who are attracted to people of the same sex. There are even seminarians. And one can even recognize if they're chaste, if they're celibate, that in some cases that they would be holy. Absolutely. That still doesn't account for the fact that Pope Francis is also saying, but they should be admitted in the seminary. Yes, they're there, and perhaps they shouldn't have been admitted in the seminary. And we can recognize in some cases they're holy, but they shouldn't be admitted in the seminary. See, Father James Martin leaves out that part. So what Pope Francis says here is perfectly reconcilable with what we know factually Pope Francis has been saying in documents that he has approved, like the 2016 document, and so on. But he tries to put a spin on it, making it look like Pope Francis is going against what he's been saying about homosexuals not being admitted in the seminary. Now, again, Father Martin doesn't come out and explicitly say that, but that's the impression he tries to get by saying, once again, he had confirmed my ministry with LGBTQ people and showed his openness and love for the LGBTQ community. Look, we can have no problem with a ministry to LGBTQ people. The problem is the way that Martin goes about doing it. And I doubt very seriously Francis is aware of some of those finer points on how he does it, because he doesn't just minister to LGBTQ people. He also subtly tries to undermine the church's teaching on same-sex acts, something that Pope Francis doesn't agree with. So Pope Francis certainly doesn't bless that. But you can see how he's trying to spin it. And I just want to point out, yeah, it's not working because all of the evidence is going against you, Father James Martin. It is very clear. There's just too much evidence out there. There are too many explicit statements, too many videos of Pope Francis on video saying homosexuality is a sin, gay marriage is not marriage, homosexual unions can't be blessed. He's saying all this on video. Like, you can't argue with video. And again, I have to reiterate, saying that there are holy and celibate seminarians and priests with homosexual tendencies is not inconceivable for something that Pope Francis may have said. It's not inconceivable. But that's perfectly reconcilable with what he literally said yesterday, the day before this, which is, but they still shouldn't be admitted in the seminary. We can recognize that if they were wrongly admitted, yeah, you could still have cases where they're holy, but they should be admitted. Number two, it's not an issue of holiness. Somehow Father James Martin is putting it in the realm of holiness. Father James Martin, the Virgin Mary is probably the holiest of us all, right? Are you saying the Virgin Mary should be ordained? No. If the Virgin Mary were here right now, you wouldn't say that, well, I don't know, maybe you would say that, but the church wouldn't ordain her because it doesn't have the authority to ordain her. But that doesn't say anything about her holiness. The issue of her being holy has nothing to do with this. Of course she's holy. The point is, Jesus has not given the church authority to ordain women. So the church couldn't do that today, even if the Virgin Mary, appeared right before the Holy Father or something. The Holy Father still can't ordain her because the Holy Father doesn't have that authority. So putting it in the realm of holiness, like Father James Martin is trying to do, is a smokescreen. It's not an issue of holiness. It's an issue of whether or not that person is fit for ministry. Holiness doesn't necessarily answer that question. There are holy people who are not fit for ministry. So I had to point that out and show y'all the little games that are being played here. Well, wild stuff. And, the story is developing, and I wanted to get this in there because I'm not going to have a chance to cover anything else tomorrow, because as of tomorrow, there's a new document coming out from the Vatican about the papacy. And so I will be covering that. I'm sure I'll be very occupied in engaging that. So I had to sneak this one in today, even though it's the third show for the day. Hey, I hope it was helpful. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, share this with other people who may be confused about stuff that they're hearing out there about Pope Francis on this particular issue. All right, we'll see you later. God bless. Hey friends, do you want others to discover why the Catholic Church is the church that Jesus established? And do you want to help people make sense of all the confusion in the Catholic Church today? Help contribute to this mission by supporting Reason and Theology at patreon.com/Reason and Theology. By doing so, you'll also get access to exclusive content for patrons only. Also, if you want to deepen your faith, there are free ebooks and even courses that you can sign up for by visiting reason.podia.com.